The U.S. is continuing to climb its way out of the pandemic downturn, but we have had some promising news with the monthly job reports this morning. Another 1.37 million jobs were added to the U.S. economy in August, and the unemployment rate tumbled by 8.4%, which is by far the lowest rate since the coronavirus shutdown in March. Joining me now with reaction is Chris Markowski, host of the Watchdog on Wall Street radio show and president of Markowski Investments, and Maddie Doppler, senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and president of Forward Strategies. America is still down 11.5 million jobs from February, but the unemployment rate is the best we've seen in months. Chris, your thoughts?
Listen, I'm thrilled to see it down. All the experts, the Fed, everybody out there weren't even close. They didn't think we were going to get to single digits until next year. So it's a great number. Now we've got the hard part. We've got to get down to full employment. And that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do with many urban areas still shut down. New York City being one, learned yesterday 25,000 hotel rooms may not open again. And you think about all of the people that are involved in servicing that. So there's an entire area of the service economy that we've got to get back. So great numbers, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, Maddie, your thoughts on this? Because as Chris mentioned, we have New York where the mayor says, well, restaurants probably aren't going to reopen inside until we have a vaccine.
Well, that's right. And a lot of urban areas are probably in that situation because of density, right? I mean, how do you do social distancing in a restaurant in New York inside? There just isn't the room to do it. Now, the jobs numbers today was extremely strong for this point in the recovery. As Chris mentioned, even the Congressional Budget Office thought that we'd be in double-digit unemployment until next year. But the unemployment rate doesn't really tell us the full picture. To be counted as unemployed, you have to be looking for a job. We know hundreds of thousands of workers, if not millions of workers, couldn't look for a job because of the pandemic. So the thing that I'm focused on really is that labor force participation rate. And that's the reason the unemployment rate came down. It's because more people got pulled off of the sidelines and are actually looking for work or getting a job than were before. I think that's really the crucial component here. Can we get people engaged in the labor marketplace who were otherwise left out because of the pandemic? If that number continues to rise, then we will see even more economic recovery on the horizon. One thing I want to note, though, that labor force participation rate seem to come from men coming back into the workforce. The labor force participation rate for women, both Black women, white women, and Hispanic women, all stayed flat. I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that we don't see schools reopening yet. And until we get there, we will not have a full economic recovery.
Yeah, absolutely agree, Maddie. And we are seeing such a promising trend right now with more businesses reopen, as we talked about. People are going back to work. But I want to play you this sound from an interview Biden did with ABC last week and get your reaction, both of you. Listen.
Would you be prepared to shut this country down again?
I would be prepared to do whatever it takes to save lives, because we cannot get the country moving until we control the virus. That is the fundamental flaw of this administration's thinking to begin with. In order to keep the country running and moving and the economy growing and people employed, you have to fix the virus. You have to deal with the virus.
So if the scientists say shut it down?
I would shut it down. I would listen to the scientists.
Yeah, and Chris, he mentioned just the other day that he thinks all schools should reopen. We need to reopen, and how President Trump has done an awful job. But another shutdown would be detrimental to our economic recovery, correct?
I don't even want to think about it. It's like a horror movie I don't want to ever go and see. We cannot go back to this again. And it's interesting. Actually, Donald Luskin, who does a great job with his Trend Macro, did a study of cell phone data. And people have been together for a while now. I have 3 teenagers. If you think that they've been staying at home and staying safe over the course of the summer, they haven't. They're at beaches. They're hanging out with their friends. They're out and about. To think that we actually can control nature in of itself, to me, is patently absurd. Yes, we want to have a vaccine, but we get to have a flu vaccine. We take it every single year, but it doesn't mean that it's going to work. We obviously have to protect people that are vulnerable, and we have to move on because guess what? All of this shutdown stuff, that's a public health concern, too.
Yeah, it's a mental health concern, too, a lot of experts say. Maddie, I want to get your thoughts. And if we had to shut down the economy again, what would that do?
Well, I just think this is such a false choice. It really shows the dearth of leadership and the lack of even not in creative thinking, just leadership thinking at all levels of government. Listen, the whole reason we shut down at the beginning of the year when coronavirus first hit these shores was because we had no other option. We didn't have a plan in place. We didn't have the infrastructure to handle this kind of pandemic. Now that we're 6 months into this, I think it's a reasonable expectation that we can start to reopen, but also make accommodations for the fact that the public health situation is different than it was 6 months ago. This notion that we can only shut down or we can only fully reopen without any kind of difference in our behavior, I think, is nonsensical. And I think you heard that, from what Chris was saying. Our teenagers have figured out how to interact and, be able to go on with their lives without having to completely sit at home all summer long, and that makes sense to me. So this notion that we only have two choices to move forward, I think, really demonstrates that the politics of the moment have overshadowed common sense thinking and really, thinking about how we move forward in a way where society is different, but it doesn't have to be changed forever.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And we still have a lot of businesses that are shut down that haven't been able to open yet. Chris Markowski, Maddie Doubler, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.